Blessed with a beautiful day to come out and assemble together, and pray that what I say will be pleasing and acceptable in God's sight. What a week we have endured here in our country. The evil surrounds us. That's all that we can say about it, because there's nothing more or nothing less than pure evil at work. To see the lives, senseless lives lost that we have witnessed, but to me, even more disturbing than that are the ones who are celebrating it. That is a sign of evil hearts. That's all we can say about it. And as I was trying to compose some thoughts for this morning's lesson and thinking, what in the world could we possibly talk about that could remotely relate to what we experience in this world, aside from loving our enemies and turning the other cheek, I thought about the dangers of evil companions. Because if we are Christians and we look around at those who are truly trying to follow God's word, we are a very small minority. We are surrounded by immoral people. We cannot pick the people that we are surrounded by in most circumstances. We cannot pick who we work with. We cannot choose who we go to school with. We cannot handpick our neighbors. Even if we wanted to, we cannot. We cannot prevent somebody that's evil from moving in next door to us or in our neighborhood. But we can. There are relationships that we can have a choice in. Who I choose to spend my time with, who I have my most intimate personal relationships with. I have the power to choose those companions. And if I'm selecting those who are evil, the scriptures are not silent about that. There is a great danger to my soul in picking those people and choosing what people I choose to spend my time with. It will affect me. We may think we are so strong. We may believe that we're going to be the ones that influence them for good, and we might, but we have to be very careful. We don't get to pick. We're more or less forced to associate who we work with when we start our job. Now, I'm lucky. I work with my dog because I sit at home on the couch. My dog and cat are my coworkers, but that doesn't mean that we have to socialize with them afterwards and keep them in our closest confines as friends. Anything beyond what I'm required to do is my choice. And when I see someone and want to bring them in as a close confidant, I can only assume that they're going to start affecting me. And the scriptures speak greatly about this. They are anything but silent. They give warning to us. And as I was looking at this, we're going to begin looking at a king in the Old Testament who was greatly influenced. Not only did it influence him by the people that he chose to align himself with, but it influenced the entire kingdom. And I may butcher some of these names as we get into the Old Testament, so just sound them out with me. The King Jehoshaphat. He is listed as one of the good kings of Judah. We'll see in a few verses here in 2 Chronicles 17 of what a good man that he was or tried to be. We know Judah had some evil kings, those who did not do what was right in God's sight, but that can't be said about Jehoshaphat. He cared about God and cared about what was right, but he was going to be influenced by someone else. 2 Chronicles chapter 17 and verse 1 beginning. Then Jehoshaphat, his son, reigned in his place and strengthened himself against Israel. And he placed troops in all the fortified cities of Judah and set garrisons in the land of Judah and in the cities of Ephraim, which Asa his father had taken. Now the Lord was with Jehoshaphat because he walked in the former ways of his father David. He did not seek the Baals, but he sought the God of his father and walked in his commandments and not according to the acts of Israel. Therefore the Lord established the kingdom in his hand, and all Judah gave presents to Jehoshaphat, and he had riches and honor in abundance. And his heart took delight in the ways of the Lord Moreover, he removed the high places and wooden images from Judah. So just in these short verses, we see what a good man he was. He sought God. He walked in his ways from verse 4 there. He did many things to reverse the direction that the previous leaders had done, the evil kings before him and how ungodly they were. And he tried to walk in the way of the Lord and to bring those places back. An interesting phrase and a very admirable quality about him is in verse 6 here. His heart took delight in the ways of the Lord. Isn't that something that we should all want to have said about us? Well, we didn't serve mumbling and grumbling and complaining. Our heart took delight and found pleasure in doing what was right in God's sight. More than that, he made the nation do the same. He tore down those idols, those places of worship for the false gods in verse 6 as well. Imagine the people of God, his chosen people, the ones who had had an opportunity to have such a close relationship with God, had chosen to put these places of worship up in their land, the land that he had given to them. And history would teach us what atrocities were committed at some of these idols as they offered sacrifices to these other gods. And Jehoshaphat tore them down. He purged the land from that blight. He also taught the law to the people of God in 2 Chronicles chapter 17 and beginning in verse 9. And again, not to butcher these, or verse 7 through 9, but so I won't butcher those names in 7 and 8. We'll just read verse 9. So they taught in Judah and had the book of the law of the Lord with them. They went throughout all the cities of Judah and taught the people. Notice where they went back to start teaching from: the book of the law. They had gotten so far away, they drifted so far off course that they had to go back to the very beginning to be taught. It doesn't say he taught a refresher or retaught things. We're going to start teaching the law of the Lord from the beginning. How sad that the children of the Lord, the children of God, didn't know his word because they had went so far away from it. But as I condemn them there, are we any different as a society? So many would have to be taught the very beginning principles. And sadly, some of them may even wear the name of Christian because we as a society have drifted so far away from God and so far away from his teaching. It's funny, it's Friday I think it was, I was driving down High Street and there was an old man standing there holding a sign, and the sign is big, a big sign, and it said, he probably thought I was agreeing with him. I took so long reading it as I was passing by him, but it said, Jesus came to save the world, not judge it. And I'm sure that many people drove by and applauded that sign because it made them feel good about how they were living. But they're completely ignorant to what the scriptures say. Yes, Jesus did come to save the world, but to remove the judging part is doing nothing except making me feel comfortable in my sin, because it removes obedience and repentance on my part. Because in Acts chapter 17 and verse 31, Paul says, because he has appointed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by the man whom he has ordained. He has given assurance of this to all by raising him from the dead. Jesus is coming to judge the world. That's one of several scriptures that would tell us that. And here's this man holding the sign. He's only going to come to save it. Well, he has offered salvation, but there is also a judgment coming. But he's teaching something to please others, not what's pleasing to God. Just like Jehoshaphat, he had to go back and start teaching them what God wanted them to hear, not what they had enjoyed hearing. In the instance of Jehoshaphat, this worked. And the people followed his leadership, and they started going back to the old laws. We won't read all this in 2 Chronicles 19 there, but he started appointing judges throughout the land, setting up what was righteous among them. And when nations threatened to attack Judah, what did he say? Let's go back and let's start praying to God. How often the Lord had, in 1 Chronicles chapter 20, and beginning in verse 1 there, how often the Lord had allowed foreign nations to come in and attack them for disobedience. But this time, because of Jehoshaphat and his obedience, the Lord delivered Judah. Beginning in verse 20, or verse 1, I'm sorry, of 2 Chronicles chapter 20. It happened after this time that the people of Moab and the people of Ammon and others with them, besides the Ammonites, came to battle against Jehoshaphat. Then some came and told Jehoshaphat, saying, a great multitude is coming against you from beyond the sea, from Syria, and they are in Hazon Tamar, which is in Gedi. And Jehoshaphat feared and set himself to seek the Lord, and proclaimed a fast throughout all Judah. So Judah gathered together to ask help from the Lord, and from all the cities of Judah they came to seek the Lord. Again, where are we going in times of trouble? We're not looking to ourselves. Let's look to the Lord and seek his help. The enemies ended up attacking and destroying themselves and allowed Judah to take the spoils for their battle, beginning in verse 24 for 2 Chronicles 20. So when Judah came to a place overlooking the wilderness, they looked toward the multitude, and there were their dead bodies fallen on the earth. No one had escaped. When Jehoshaphat and his people came to take away their spoil, they found among them an abundance of valuables on the dead bodies and precious jewelry, which they stripped off for themselves, more than they could carry away. And they were 3 days gathering the spoils because there was so much. And on the fourth day they assembled in the valley of Berchoth, for they were blessed, for there they blessed the Lord. Therefore the name of that place is called the valley of Berchoth till this day. Then they returned, every man of Judah and Jerusalem, with Jehoshaphat in front of them, to go back to Jerusalem with joy, for the Lord had made them rejoice over their enemies. So they came to Jerusalem with stringed instruments and harps and trumpets to the house of the Lord. And the fear of God was on all the kingdom of those countries when they had heard that the Lord had fought against the enemies of Israel. Then the realm of Jehoshaphat was quiet, for God gave him rest all around. There were great things done by Jehoshaphat during his reign in Jerusalem, especially when we compare what other kings had done before him and after him. He wanted to do what was right in the sight of God. But as we study him and we see how he did his best to right the ship that Israel had, or Judah had, he's back to serving God, to following him, to teach us his commandments. But when we think about great kings of Judah, his name isn't one that's on the top of the list, is it? He's usually not mentioned among them. We talk about David. We'll talk about Solomon, the wise man. We'll talk about Hezekiah, maybe Josiah, if we dig a little deeper, but rarely do we talk about King Jehoshaphat, a man who worked so diligently to bring back God's law to the forefront of the nation. He sought the ways of the Lord. He took delight in doing the will of the Lord. And why is it that we don't talk about him very much? The reason is, despite all of his great qualities as a leader, he made a mistake. And that mistake had a lasting ripple effect on the kingdom of Judah. And all of the positives that he did got lost because of his companionship. Do we not think that our actions and our companions have a lasting effect? Think of the way that our choices can have that ripple effect, not just immediately, but for generations over one action, one choice, one decision that we can make. Jenny said to me yesterday, and as we were talking about the road rage, she said, "You're going to get us in trouble sometime because I will tell people why they're driving wrong." That person that was holding up traffic in a no turn lane to turn left, I was going to point up and tell them there was a road sign up there that says no left turn. She said, "You're going to get us in trouble." That could have lasting consequences for that. Well, what was Jehoshaphat's action? Well, he made a connection, an alliance with King Ahab of Israel. And this alliance was made when Jehoshaphat took one of Ahab's daughters in marriage, Athaliah, to be the wife of his son Joram. In 2 Chronicles 18 and verse 1, by marriage he aligned himself with Ahab. Now, maybe it was a political marriage for that alliance. Maybe it was for prosperity. Maybe it was for strength against enemies. Maybe we saw there in the earlier reading that we looked at in 2 Chronicles that there were some problems where he was having to fortify Judah to keep Israel out. So maybe it was for that reason. We don't know. But 2 Chronicles 18, Jehoshaphat had riches and honors in abundance, and by marriage he allied himself with Ahab. Jehoshaphat's connection in the kingdom, not just himself, but the entire kingdom of Judah, was now aligned and had a relationship with King Ahab of Israel, an evil king, an evil man. And he became close companions to someone who did not care one bit about God and did not care about doing what was right. By this time, the northern kingdom were completely turned away from God. They were no longer worshiping him in any way, not even close to what God had prescribed for Moses in their worship to the law and following the law. They were chasing after idols. Their fate at this point had already been sealed as a nation. Of the leaders that Israel had, Ahab was probably one of the worst, if not the worst, as far as being a sinner. And here is Jehoshaphat, a man who took delight in doing the law of the Lord and getting the kingdom and his subjects back to following the ways of the Lord. And here he is tying himself to this wicked man. Why would he do that with someone that does not care about what was right? And we're going to see how devastating that decision was to him and to the kingdom. This is one decision where he linked himself to evil. And otherwise, as we read, a good person, this good leader, the one who had tried to do so much to turn the kingdom back towards God, has now taken himself and gotten himself into a close alignment with the most evil king that Israel had. So, some would say, in essence, they're relatives because they're tied through marriage. There's already a connection because they were all related to begin with from back to Jacob, but that connection had been broken because of their faith in God or lack thereof and the way that Israel had been going. And here Jehoshaphat is tying them back together. And couldn't this be applied to us today as well? Oh yes, I could be serving God or trying to do what's right and look at my family or friends that I'm tying myself with and connecting myself to. That connection, that fellowship between light and darkness, it does not work. They're going to have an influence over me. In those times, kings would marry off their sons and daughters to other nations to help bring about peace or prosperity. And maybe this was the case here. Maybe Ahab or Jehoshaphat felt that the two nations needed to be preserved, so we're going to connect one another through this marriage. Whatever the reason, we're not told specifically, but we are told what a big mistake this was on Jehoshaphat's part. It was terrible because in doing this and making this alliance with King Jehoshaphat as an ally, he was aligning himself with a wicked man. 1 Kings chapter 21 and verse 25. 1 Kings chapter 21 and beginning in verse 5. But there was no one like Ahab who sold himself to do wickedness in the sight of the Lord, because Jezebel, his wife, stirred him up. Now, we know the name Jezebel. We know Ahab was an evil king, and God is going to hold him accountable for that. But we see the force behind him. It's his wife, Jezebel. Well, we know the number of times that her name comes up in the scriptures, and always as a negative example because of her influence over Israel. And here he is being driven by her, the force of her influence behind him. Oftentimes when we study something evil, even in a figurative sense, the name Jezebel comes up. She had a great negative influence over Ahab in the kingdom of Israel. And if we study, we'll see that there are times when Ahab actually sees the truth. He sees God's way as the right way, but there's Jezebel there pushing him back in the other direction, making sure he does not turn to the Lord. Ahab will see it and realize the direction that they're heading is wrong. And there's Jezebel saying, no, let's stay here. Let's keep this course. See the ripple effect beginning? Jezebel influences Ahab, and Ahab and Israel's influence is coming to affect Jehoshaphat and Judah. Remember the kind of woman that she was. And very quickly in the account in Chronicles, Ahab invites Jehoshaphat to join him in attacking the Syrians. And Jehoshaphat responds by promising his loyalty to King Ahab in 2 Chronicles 18 and verse 3. Here is a man who is evil. He is worshiping Baal. He has taken his kingdom in the same direction because that all of Israel was doing that. He has went as far away from God as possible, and he's coming to Jehoshaphat and wanting to align him as the same people. In verse 3 here, so King Ahab of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, will you go with me against Ramoth Gilead? And he answered him, I am as you are, and my people as your people. We will be with you in war. He's pledging to be with him along with his people and support him, to help him when he needs help, regardless of what God thinks about it. Why? Because of that alliance that had already been made, because he tied himself to that evil king. Again, think back to all that Jehoshaphat had done earlier to restore the kingdom back to a godly nation. He taught the word of the Lord to the kingdom. He tore down those places of idol worship, at least most of them. He put the kingdom back on track to serve God and to be right with him, but it's going to be derailed because of his companionship with Ahab. The connection has already been made. The blind spot, the weakness is there. And after this alliance, after this agreement here in verse 3, then Jehoshaphat goes and he asks God what he thinks about it. After it's done. He's already given his word in verse 6 there of 1 Chronicles 18. Don't you think if Jehoshaphat had been thinking correctly, that he would have asked this question before getting involved with all this? But like us, head first down the path and then turns around to see what God has to say. But God's advice was probably not pleasing to him once they started hearing it. 2 Chronicles 18 and verse 6, but Jehoshaphat said, is there not still a prophet of the Lord here that we may inquire of him? Now let's ask for a prophet. Let's see what God's advice is, what he has to say about this going to war with Ahab. I've already said I'm going to, but let's see what he has to say. God has promised us, and he is faithful. He's promised us ways out of temptations. But we get past the point of no return We get so far and so deep into sin, as we were talking in our Bible study this morning about how sin enslaves us and it wraps us in that trap. Well, we get as far down in it as we possibly can, and then we turn around to try to find that way that God has given us. God probably gave us a way out way earlier on, but we rush headlong towards it, and headlong towards those that we know are not good, those evil influences. And then we sit back after we're in a mess and try to figure out how to remove ourselves from the situation. The best response would have probably not been get in that situation in the first place. Jehoshaphat has promised his alliance to Ahab. Now he's looking back to see what God has to say. Had he actually taken the time to consult the prophet first, he would have found that the news was not good. And of course, Ahab sounds like many of us today when confronted with this news, but in 2 Chronicles 18 and verse 17, he blames the prophet because he didn't like what he knew he wasn't going to like what he said. In verse 17, and the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, did I not tell you that he would not prophesy good concerning me, but evil? I knew he wasn't going to say what I wanted to. Those people of the Lord, they hate me. They don't want to tell me what I want to hear. And isn't that like our society today? We don't like what the Bible says. We don't want to hear a sermon speaking out against something that we enjoy, something that we take pleasure in. Maybe Ahab would have gotten a more pleasing response if he had been following God's word from the beginning. We can't expect to do what we want to do and still have a good relationship with God. The prophet, when the prophet spoke the truth to Ahab and Jehoshaphat. They didn't like what he said. You've made this alignment here. You have hurt the kingdom by doing so. The end result is not going to be good. And when Jehoshaphat gets home from going into battle, he is rebuked by the prophet here in 2 Chronicles 19 and verse 2. In God's eyes, that's exactly what Jehoshaphat was doing. He was aligned and he joined this evil king, and that this king hated the Lord. In 2 Chronicles 19 and verse 2, and Jehu, the son of Hanani, the seer, went out to meet him and said to King Jehoshaphat, should you help the wicked and love those who hate the Lord? Therefore the wrath of the Lord is on you. Hate, that's a strong word, isn't it? But what had he done? He had aligned himself to help those who were against the Lord. We don't want to think, we don't like hate speech, and sadly many are calling the truth hate speech, but hate, that's a very harsh word, and we don't want to think about that when we are aligning ourselves with the sinful world and helping them, we are hating the Lord. But what did Jesus say? If you're not for me, you're against me. Indeed, we hate God when we are helping and supporting the world. If this week hasn't shown us anything, it should have shown us the evil that is inside of many people's heart. Thousands and thousands of people. And I don't know everything that man said. I only heard 5 and 10 second clips of things that he's spoken. So I can't say yay or nay or what he's saying. But a lot of what he spoke about came from the Bible. And to see people cheering for him to be shot and killed in front of his wife and children, what kind of a society are we living in? And here we are going to align ourselves with that. That's what Jehoshaphat did. And he could have argued, he could have said, well, that's a political move. I did this because they're a neighboring kingdom and we need to keep peace with them so they don't come in and attack us. It was nothing more than a strategy. It doesn't have anything with my feelings toward God. It was because I was trying to preserve the kingdom. That's not how God viewed it, was it? You've aligned yourself with this person who is evil and you hate me because of that. The wrath of the Lord is going to come upon you. The very first slide that we looked at was full of Jehoshaphat's good character traits. It was full of very admirable qualities, things that each of us should be very proud of to have said about us. But that all came to an end, and it came to nothing because of his companionship and his alignment with this relationship with King Ahab, this evil king who was influenced by his evil wife. So let's think for a minute about how important our relationships are. Does it matter who we choose to be our closest friends? Does it matter who we choose to make our husband or wife? Does it matter who I choose to spend my time with? We call it quality time. Those that we love to associate with. Does it matter? It matters to God, doesn't it? God saw that Jehoshaphat at one point in time loved him, but then he aligned himself with Ahab in this foolish decision. And the wrath of God was upon him because of that. And this evening, Lord willing, we're going to start looking at the ripple effect of that decision. Because it just didn't affect Jehoshaphat. It affected many of the kings that followed him. Just like David, when he was told the sword would never depart from his house because of his decisions that were wrong. And it didn't. And Jehoshaphat brought, because of this one decision and the influence that kept happening after it, we're going to see where the wrath of the Lord was upon him. And this ripple effect that happened to Judah, the nation as a whole, because, and you trace it back to this alliance to King Ahab. So if you're subject to the Lord's invitation in any way, did not mean to bring that slide up, think about the condition of your soul, and if there's something that needs to be changed, let's do that now while we have the opportunity. We don't know what tomorrow may bring. And as I always say, that's why Jesus tells us we need to stay prepared. We need to be ready, because our time on this earth could come to an abrupt end. And if we haven't made preparations, and if our heart is not in a right relationship with God, it will be too late to do something about it then. So if you're subject to the Lord's invitation in any way, take this time to think about our soul and make changes in our life while we have the opportunity as we stand and sing.
Hear the sweet voice of